Let us bow our heads and put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for gathering all of us today. May you bestow your guidance and blessings so that we can enjoy and appreciate its significance in our lives. Bless everyone who are present here today, that each one of us may be able to share our knowledge, understanding, and wisdom for your glory and honor. May the various activities related to this event be a success through your intervention. We all ask of this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
Dreadful darkness, we shall be the light and lead the path to wisdom. Our will to be our might to those in pain and suffering. We shall heed their call with us to care and comfort. Compassion above all, to face a brighter future, bound in unity. The Philippine College of Physicians, we shall be. Hand in hand, building a stronger nation,
Panatang Karangalan ng PCP. Bilang isang tapat na manggagamot PCP, ipinapangako ko na magpapamalas ako ng kabutihan at katapatan sa isip, sa salita at sa gawa. Pangangalagaan ko ang dignidad ng aking propesyon sa lahat ng pagkakataon. Gagalangin ko ang mga kapwa ko manggagamot, kapwa manggagawang pangkalusugan, at iba pang may kinalaman sa aking gawain. Sa wastong pamamaraan lamang ako makikitungo sa mga sangay o industriyang pangkalusugan. Hindi ko pagsasamantalahan ang unayang ito at hindi ko ito gagamitin sa pansariling pakinabang. Paninindigan ko ang katapatan at katotohanan at higit sa lahat, uunahin ko ang kapakanan at kabutihan ng aking mga pasyente sa lahat ng pagkakataon.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Philippine College of Physicians and PCP Committee on Climate Change, Environment and Health, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Water Security and Planetary Health in a Warming World. I am Dr. Mark Anthony Chu, and I will be your moderator for this session. As we face accelerating climate change, rising temperatures, and extreme weather events, the intersection between environmental sustainability and human health has never been more urgent. Water security is no longer just an environmental issue, it is a public health priority, a healthcare system issue, and a planetary survival issue. Today's discussion will help us better understand how climate change affects water system, the implications for global and local health, and what healthcare professionals can do in response. Before we begin with our discussion, may I call on the Regent Champion of the PCP Committee on Climate Change, Environment and Health, Dr. Ian Homer Kua, for his opening remarks.
Good day. On behalf of the Philippine College of Physicians, I warmly welcome you to this important webinar organized by the PCP Committee on Climate Change, Environment, and Health. I commend our committee chair, Dr. Sheila May Sonsa, for her leadership in advancing climate-responsive healthcare within our college. We're honored to have with us our distinguished speakers, Professor Mario Soriano Jr. and Dr. Daisy Ilagan Tagarda, and our moderator, Dr. Mark Anthony Chu. Thank you for sharing your expertise. Water security is fundamentally a health issue. In a warming world, disruptions in water systems directly affect disease patterns, sanitation, nutrition, and health system resilience. As physicians, we must recognize that planetary health and patient health are inseparable. May today's discussion deepen our understanding and strengthen our commitment to climate-informed, evidence-based action. Thank you, and I wish everyone a meaningful webinar.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kua, for that inspiring message. Before we proceed, just a few reminders. You may post questions in the chat box at any time. We will have a dedicated Q&A session after the lectures. With that, let's now turn to the heart of today's discussion, and we are very fortunate to have two distinguished speakers who will guide us through these topics. Let's meet our first speaker. He is currently an assistant professor in the Department of Geography at the National University of Singapore. Previously, he served as postdoctoral research associate and lecturer at the High Meadows Environment Institute and Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, Princeton University, New Jersey, USA. He earned his PhD in Environmental Science, Hydrology and Water Resources, Yale University, Connecticut, USA in 2022. He got his Master's of Philosophy in Forestry and Environmental Studies in Yale in 2018. He earned his undergraduate degree in Civil Engineering from the University of the Philippines in 2012. His research focuses on human systems interact with water and environmental contaminants using tools from hydrology, sustainability science, geography, and applied data science. He examines how human activities affect water quantity and quality and how societies respond to changing water risks. His work spans groundwater contamination, the water energy nexus, sustainable food systems, climate adaptation, and public health impacts of contaminated water. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Mario A. Soriano Jr. Professor Mario, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Chu. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Yes, thank you, Dr. Chu, for the introduction, and thank you to Dr. Sheila May Sonza and to Ryan as well for this opportunity to speak with you all today. So I am an interdisciplinary hydrologist examining how the movement of water and contaminants in the environment interacts with socioeconomic systems and outcomes, including human health and well-being. I am not an epidemiologist, although I have collaborated with them and other public health experts in the past in some previous projects, some outcomes of which I will be sharing with you all today. So as Dr. Chu mentioned, I am also an assistant professor at the Department of Geography at the National University of Singapore and a core faculty member for a new Master of Science in Climate Change and Sustainability program administered by the department. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me. So to understand the health of our species, we first have to understand the limits of our home.
So this plot shows us that for the past 12,000 years, humanity has flourished within the Holocene, a period characterized by exceptionally stable conditions. However, we have now entered a new geological epoch, which is proposed to be called the Anthropocene, an era where human activity is the dominant force reshaping the Earth. This era is marked by a great acceleration in socioeconomic trends like GDP increase, population growth, and infrastructure development, alongside environmental impacts, including higher greenhouse gas emissions, rising temperatures, and forest loss. There is little question that human activities are pushing the Earth to its limits. The Planetary Boundaries Framework, introduced by Johann Rockstrom in 2009, identifies 9 critical Earth system processes that regulate the stability and resilience of the planet. This includes climate change, novel entities, stratospheric ozone depletion, aerosol loading, ocean acidification, biogeochemical flows, freshwater change, land system change, and biosphere integrity. As of the 2025 assessment, 7 out of the 9 planetary boundaries have been transgressed, as shown on the plot here, by the fact that these boundaries, we are now outside the so-called safe operating space for humanity. So these boundaries that have been transgressed include climate change, biosphere integrity, and freshwater change. Transgressing these limits triggers nonlinear, abrupt, and potentially irreversible environmental changes that threaten the very foundations of modern civilization. In particular, the freshwater boundary has been crossed, meaning that the global water cycle is now outside the stable range that has supported humanity for millennia. However, Homo sapiens are not the only part of the story. Critiquing the primacy of human control as the sole planetary force implied by the term Anthropocene, the feminist theorist Donna Haraway coined the term Cthulhucene, from the Greek word chthonic, meaning of the earth, to center the discourse around the entangled relationships between humans, other species, and the ecosystems we depend on. Haraway writes, "The Cthulhucene is made up of ongoing multi-species stories and practices of becoming with in times that remain at stake, in precarious times in which the world is not finished and the sky has not fallen, yet. We are at stake to each other. Unlike the dominant dramas of the Anthropocene and Capitalocene discourse, human beings are not the only important actors in the Cthulhucene, with all other beings able simply to react. The order is reknitted. Human beings are with and of the earth, and the biotic and abiotic powers of this earth are the main story." Cthulhucene may not be a very mainstream word, but it is in recognizing these interdependencies between humans and non-humans that the concept of planetary health takes root. In other words, human health depends on ecological drivers, which are described on an Earth systems level by the planetary boundaries. The planetary health concept was introduced in 2015 by the Rockefeller Foundation Lancet Commission on Planetary Health. This report defines planetary health as the achievement of the highest attainable standard of health, well-being, and equity worldwide through judicious attention to the human systems, political, economic, and social, that shape the future of humanity and the Earth's natural systems that define the safe environmental limits within which humanity can flourish. Put simply, planetary health is the health of human civilization and the state of the natural systems on which it depends. This whole discourse has catalyzed an entirely new transdisciplinary field at the intersection of accelerating global environmental change and human health. We face a profound ecological paradox. Global measures of human health have improved significantly over the last century. For example, as seen on the plot shown on the left here, life expectancy has increased from around 50 years in the 1960s to around 70 years today. On the right, we can see that infant and child mortality decreased from more than 25% in the 1950s to less than 5% today. Unfortunately, such gains have been achieved by unsustainably exploiting nature's resources. Scientific evidence suggests that we have been mortgaging the health of future generations to realize economic gains and development in the present. All of these plots shown here show the environmental impact of human actions today. You can see this hockey stick-like curve, the rapid increase in our carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and other greenhouse gas emissions, similar increases in surface temperature and ocean acidification, as well as biosphere degradation. As a result, natural life support systems degrade, and we risk a backsliding of public health gains, facing new threats from climate-driven infectious diseases, nutritional deficiencies, and environmental displacement. Of course, as a hydrologist, my main concern is water, and specifically groundwater, and I'll tell you why in a bit here. In 2020, around 4.4 billion people across 135 low and middle income countries lacked access to safe drinking water. Safely managed drinking water is defined by these three criteria. It must be available on demand. It must be accessible on premises, and it must be free of contaminants such as E. coli and other specific chemicals. So now, while most of us probably think of surface water reservoirs as the water behind dams, groundwater actually accounts for the largest volume of accessible freshwater on Earth. It supplies drinking water to over 2 billion people and supports almost half of global irrigation for agriculture. It is crucial for food and energy security and supports livelihoods, promoting socioeconomic development and poverty alleviation. Under a climate-altered hydrologic cycle, groundwater will play an even more important role as surface water supplies dwindle and become more variable. Cases of aquifer depletion and degradation around the world highlight the many threats to this vital resource. Consequently, threats to groundwater directly translate to threats to water security. As we all know, water security underpins multiple dimensions of health. Clean water is essential for drinking and sanitation. It is a primary requirement for human survival and is recognized by the United Nations as a fundamental human right. Water is essential for every state of food production and is also fundamental to energy production, as encapsulated in the concept of the water, food, and energy nexus. Water sustains ecosystems. All of these functions have deep entanglements with various aspects of human health, including nutrition, energy access, and mental well-being. As mentioned earlier, the latest scientific assessments show that we are no longer within the safe operating space of the planetary boundaries for freshwater use. This risk map, shown on the slide here, demonstrates that approximately a quarter of the global land area faces increased risk. So those are all of these regions you can see here from the orange and warmer colors. The transgression of the water planetary boundary is driven by a combination of direct human interventions, land system changes, and the magnifying effects of climate change. Humanity has placed dams on roughly 60% of the world's rivers, drastically altering natural river flow regimes and destroying aquatic habitats. Approximately 70% of the world's major aquifers are in long-term decline because of sustained withdrawals exceeding renewable replenishment. Although 70%, or roughly 70% of global freshwater withdrawals are used for agriculture, such that in many regions, this intensive irrigation has caused so much depletion that rivers like the Colorado and the Rio Grande already frequently fail to reach the sea. Within the planetary health framework, water security is increasingly reframed from a matter of scarcity and stress to a matter of global water bankruptcy. The concept of water bankruptcy compares our water systems to bank accounts. We draw from our annual income, which consists of renewable flows like rain and rivers, and long-term savings, which consists of non-renewable resources like deep aquifers and glaciers. In many regions, we have been systematically overdrawing these accounts for decades. Water bankruptcy is characterized by two conditions. The first one is insolvency, where human withdrawals exceed renewable inflows and safe limits. And the second one is irreversibility, wherein the resulting damage, such as compacted aquifers, subsided deltas, and lost glaciers, cannot be restored on human timescales. These changes suggest that the old normal, the stable water cycle, can no longer be recovered. Water bankruptcy is not just a matter of physical volumes of water either. It is a story of water that is it is also a story of water that is physically present but no longer fit for purpose due to pollution from anthropogenic activities, as illustrated by this diagram here. In many regions, downstream communities face a hydrological paradox. There may be sufficient flows in terms of purely volumetric amounts of water, yet much of that cannot be used safely for drinking, irrigation, or recreation without costly treatment. This calls to mind the adage, water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. We need, in some cases, very costly treatment in order to be able to use the water. This level of pollution poses serious risks to human and ecosystem health. So please allow me to talk a little bit about some of the research that I've been doing since my dissertation. So for a number of years, I have been working on quantifying the risk of groundwater contamination from unconventional oil and gas development in the USA. This is more commonly known as fracking or hydraulic fracturing. Fracking has enabled the USA to expand production of fossil fuels over the last 2 decades and become the world's top exporter of natural gas in recent years, exceeding even a lot of the former leaders in the Middle Eastern countries. Fracking consists of several stages, but mostly it involves the injection of large volumes of water mixed with sand and chemicals in order to create openings in target oil-producing formations here. My research has focused on the northeastern USA, a region known as Appalachia, which is projected to continue being a significant hotspot for unconventional oil and gas development, even as production in other regions of the US slows down. Appalachia also has a very long history of fossil fuel extraction, including coal mining and conventional oil and gas development. It is where the oldest oil well in the USA is found. I and my collaborators have been developing and refining a physics-based framework to predict where chemical spills from oil and gas well pads would travel across the groundwater system to shed light on whether such contaminants pose a risk to residential drinking water wells. I should mention that in this region, where you can see thousands of oil and gas wells have been drilled, This region is also home to over 4 million residents who rely on groundwater wells for their daily domestic consumption, such that any risks to these groundwater resources need to be carefully assessed. We developed a metric called groundwater vulnerability to contamination and have found that it is in fact associated with higher likelihoods of detecting chemical fingerprints of oil and gas development in water samples, supporting the validity of our framework. In other words, households that we predicted to be likely at risk of contamination did indeed exhibit signs of contamination in their well water. Along the same lines, we also found that our metric is associated with higher median concentrations for certain chemicals, including barium, chloride, and sodium, which may have some health implications and health-based standards as well. Our work also uncovered an environmental injustice dimension, as the risk of groundwater contamination disproportionately affected low-income communities, communities with greater elderly populations, and those with more mobile homes. As I mentioned earlier, I have also been working closely with epidemiologists to link these hydrological findings to public health impacts. Our work has found evidence that living closer to unconventional oil and gas and using groundwater in these areas was linked to higher odds of developing acute lymphoblastic leukemia, or ALL, in children in Pennsylvania. We also found linkages between proximity to oil and gas development and higher odds of birth defects in Ohio. This is, of course, just adding to the mounting evidence of local health impacts from close proximity to fossil fuel development. Our work shows the direct environmental and health impacts of fracking in the Appalachian Basin. Of course, on top of all of this is also the fact that continued fossil fuel extraction creates greenhouse gas emissions that exacerbate the severity of climate change. In other words, the impacts span very localized, neighborhood scale effects all the way to the global scale, affecting regions far away from where the fossil fuels are produced. Climate change is leading to an intensification of the hydrological cycle, adding approximately 7% more moisture to the atmosphere for every 1 degree of global warming. This is simply driven by the physics of how our Earth system climate works. The intensification is leading to more frequent and severe fluctuations between excessively wet and dry periods. This map here shows us the 25 most impactful extreme weather events from January 2024 to April 2025, based on the total number of deaths or mortality, the total number of people affected, and the total economic damages. We see first that extreme weather events are happening all around the world. So we see clusters of events in North America, but also Central Asia, and many parts of the world here. The icons, the color of the icons shows us the attribution to climate change of these extreme weather events, meaning to say, can we detect the imprints of climate change to these extreme weather events here? We can see that the orange ones are ones where climate change is in the causal field of the event, and then the red colored ones are the ones where the event itself can be attributed directly to climate change. For example, here in the Philippines, we can see these 3 typhoons here. These are the typhoons Yagi, Gemi, and Tremi. That they have been found to have had intensified rainfall and wind speeds because of climate change. The storms would not have been as strong if our climate were not in this altered condition. These storm characteristics translate to greater flooding and higher damages, as well as concomitant impacts on human health and well-being. At the other extreme, the world also faces unprecedented risk of the so-called day zero droughts from a combination of hydrological compound extremes, including prolonged rainfall deficits, reduced river flow, and increasing water consumption. The terminology was first popularized during the 2017 to 2018 crisis in Cape Town, where the South African capital was at risk of not being able to supply water to its residents. The same day zero framework is back in the mainstream discourse, this time being applied to Tehran, the capital of Iran, where municipal systems are on the verge of total tap shutdown. Incidentally, some of the violence in the Iranian capital these days is being linked to this inability to provide sufficient water. Of course, there are many other drivers to that conflict as well. This map is from a recent study that projected that many regions around the world face high risk of day zero droughts in the 2020s and 2030s, as you can see in the rose diagram on the right here. Most of the projected day zero droughts are forecast to occur sometime between 2020 and 2040 here. These regions that are at risk are shown on the map on the left, and you can see that there's a big concentration of possible day zero droughts in the Middle East and North Africa, in South Africa as well, and many other regions, including the Western United States and even here in Southeast Asia and Australia. The study also found that the duration of day zero droughts in the future will be longer than the time between such successive events. This means that societies will have less time to recover between these multi-year droughts. While Metro Manila has yet to be cast in a day zero crisis mode, water service interruptions affecting various parts of the capital are not uncommon. Climate change and other anthropogenic drivers, such as failing infrastructure, may eventually force Manila to reckon with the looming day zero. Changes in the hydrological cycle may also translate to changes in water quality. For example, surface water flooding, duration, and frequency are known drivers of arsenic mobilization, meaning to say that as flooding increases in the future, arsenic that was previously sequestered in our soils and sediments may be mobilized into our groundwater and surface water resources, as predicted by this map shown here on the left. Furthermore, lower flow in rivers may mean higher contaminant concentrations due to less ability to dilute or flush our systems. Reduced groundwater recharge from uplands, increased groundwater pumping, and sea level rise all combine to enhance saltwater intrusion, potentially compromising the drinking water resources of millions of people living in coastal communities. The Philippines consistently ranks among the top countries most vulnerable to climate change impacts. Long-term temperature data shows that average temperatures are increasing. And this is largely due to minimum temperatures systematically increasing over time. In other words, it doesn't get as cool as it used to. Records also show more wet years in recent years compared to the historical average, with 2025 annual rainfall being a record amount. Maximum one-day rainfall, which is a measure of how extreme the rain is, doesn't exhibit a very clear trend, although 2025 and 2024 were also notable, specifically for being higher than average. All of these have clear implications for the management of water resources and natural hazards in the country, There are many knowledge gaps remaining. How does climate change affect our groundwater resources? How do such hydrological changes impact water quality and public health? And what are the solutions we can pursue? Attaining universal water security across space and time and protecting every citizen from the impacts of extreme events in the form of floods and droughts is a grand challenge with implications for public health and social justice. In terms of actions, we must move from a reactive crisis management to proactive approaches anchored on planetary health and environmental stewardship. These can include approaches such as integrating traditional gray infrastructure with green, nature-based solutions, as well as more proactive land use management. There is also a need to innovate in terms of environmental monitoring and predictive modeling, and such data needs to be made widely accessible to inform the public and our decision makers. More broadly, we need to bridge the gap between scientists, policymakers, and communities through genuine collaboration. And we must reimagine our relationship to our world, including future generations and the other inhabitants of our planet. Ultimately, we must shift our narrative away from socioeconomic development through unsustainable consumption toward a new relationship centering sustainability and the recognition of our interdependence with our fragile shared home. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to our discussion today.
Thank you very much, Professor Soriano, for that insightful presentation. And now let's meet our second speaker. She's an infectious disease specialist, educator, and researcher. She completed her fellowship in infectious diseases and tropical medicine at UST Hospital and her internal medicine training at St. Luke's Medical Center, Quezon City. She also holds an executive master in disaster risk and crisis management from the Asian Institute of Management. She serves as head of the Infection Prevention and Control Committee and Antimicrobial Stewardship at Diliman Doctors Hospital, and leads the Code, Calamity, Outbreak, Disaster, Emerging, and Re-emerging Infection Committee on of the Philippine Society of Microbiology and Infectious Disease. And she's an assistant professor at UST Faculty of Medicine and Surgery and research fellow at the Ateneo School of Government. She will guide us on waterborne and vector-borne diseases, showing climate and water system changes directly impact health outcomes in our communities. Let us all welcome Dr. Daisy Ilagan Tagarda. Dr. Tagarda, the mic is yours.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. That was a very informative lecture from Prof. Soriano. My lecture will focus more on the effect of climate change to health. No? So since I'm an infectious diseases specialist, I will focus more on the effect of the climate change into infectious diseases and outbreak. Okay. So our objectives for this lecture are the following: explain how climate change affects human health, describe mechanism linking climate change to epidemics and pandemics, identify climate-sensitive infectious diseases, discuss the impact of climate change on food security, and recognize implications for public health preparedness and resilience. So first, let's define climate change. It was defined by the World Health Organization that climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns primarily driven by human activities such as burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrial agriculture. So these activities' major consequences are rising global temperature, extreme weather events, sea level rise, and changing rainfall patterns. As we can notice, for the past years, we have very unpredictable weather as compared to more than 10 years ago. So it has actually affected the prediction of outbreaks in the Philippines because of the climate change. Now, these are the pathways from climate change to health impacts. we can actually classify the impacts into direct effects, indirect effects, and systemic effects. For the direct effects, some are actually being were already discussed by Prof. Soriano a while ago from his research. But other direct effects also includes heat stroke, flood injuries, and wildfire respiratory illnesses. However, I will also focus more on the indirect effects, primarily the effects on the vectors, particularly the mosquito, which are the common vectors of infectious diseases like dengue, chikungunya, malaria, and Zika virus, which are all endemic in the Philippines. And the systemic effects. So because of the climate change, there could be disruption in the health system and causing also food insecurity that somehow will have an impact on the immunity of the people, no? And then forced migration. Okay. So why infectious diseases are climate sensitive? So remember, most of the infectious diseases, so for example, we have concern of Nipah virus right now. We have around whole year round increase in the cases of dengue. So these are actually they utilize vectors. No, so climate influences the vectors or the animals. Some infection are zoonotic. No, even the COVID-19, it has been the theory is that it came from animals. So vector breeding cycles can be influenced by the climate, pathogen replication rate. So for example, in the Philippines, if it becomes hotter, the pathogens causing, for example, diarrhea, the replication has been noted to be faster. Human exposure patterns, water sanitation system, if it's contaminated, it can actually directly have an impact on the health of the patients, and animal-human interface. So the small temperature change can actually also have an effect on mosquito incubation period. It also can expand vector habitats and can increase transmission season. So that's why there are several diseases, no, especially if it's a vector-borne, that cannot be predicted anymore because of the climate change. Now let's go on and focus on vector-borne diseases. So some of the endemic diseases in the Philippines that we have, dengue, malaria, chikungunya, and Zika. Actually, dengue, chikungunya, and Zika has common vector, which is the Aedes aegypti. Malaria has a different vector, which is also a mosquito more common on rural areas or mountainous areas, which has a different vector, which is the Anopheles mosquito. The mechanism on which the climate change can affect the vector is that, as I have mentioned, warmer temperature, it causes faster mosquito breeding. Increased rainfall or flooding, it now provides more breeding sites for vector, no, specifically the mosquito. Urban heat islands can prolong the transmission season. So for example, if we can predict the rainfall in the Philippines, before summer has been exclusively summer without rainfall, but right now, even on December and summer, we have rainfall. So therefore, we provide breeding grounds for the mosquitoes carrying these viruses. In tropical countries like Philippines, this actually translates to longer dengue season. In the Southeast Asia, actually, we have a significant increase or level of mortality in dengue, no? And geographic expansion into highland areas. Now, not only will the vectors will be affected, some other infections, no, brought about by animals. We call that zoonotic infection. So examples of which, for example, Nipah virus is a zoonotic disease, no, usually being it was transmitted. It can be transmitted from the fruit bat to other animals such as pigs and horses, no, and other animals, and then can be transmitted to human and then human to human, no. Another type of zoonotic could be the coronaviruses, and the coronavirus has been predicted that it could be from the bats also or some other animals, and then like for example MERS, it came from the camel. So climate change contributes to the deforestation, habitat loss of the animals. It can also cause wildlife wildlife displacement and increased human-animal interaction. So there are even odd practices that promotes spread of outbreaks. So for example, eating of exotic animals by some people or even tribe, no, it promotes acquisition of zoonotic infection. This increased risk of spillover events and novel pathogen emergence that are not really known to cause infection in humans, but because of the close interaction of animals with humans, no, then there is transmission of the usual zoonotic infection to humans. So I have mentioned these are the examples: the Nipah virus, coronaviruses, including the COVID-19 and avian influenza. Now, climate change and pandemics. So climate change does not only directly cause pandemic, but it can result into pandemic through several reasons. No, so again, it has something to do with zoonotic spillover. Okay, one example also that I can think of is the monkeypox. No, although it originated from the monkey, there is a close interaction with humans. No, it now resulted to outbreaks of monkeypox. Expands vector ranges. No, it provides them more of breeding sites, no, and longer breeding time, which causes all year round outbreak of several diseases. It disrupts ecosystem. It increases migration and crowding. No? So for example, there is typhoon. What usually happens here in Manila is that we ask the people to go to the evacuation center. And the evacuation center is too crowded, wherein there is an increased risk for transmission, not only for respiratory infection, but also for water and foodborne diseases that causing diarrhea or even typhoid fever. It also weakens the health system. For example, if there is disruption, even the hospitals, if there is flooding, no, it is the operation of the hospital is also affected. Now, these are actually the lessons that we got from COVID-19 pandemic. No, we learned from the COVID-19 pandemic that global interconnectivity accelerates spread. So we have more access to travel around the world. However, it also increases the risk of transmission of different types of infection. The health systems are vulnerable. No, we thought that we're ready to handle infectious diseases until the pandemic happened. So it means that we need a more resilient type of health system, especially here in the Philippines. No, there was disruption of supply chain that affected the food and medicine distribution. So I can remember during that time that we had a shortage of N95 mask, no? Especially if there is flood. During that time, marami ding bagyo, no? Which actually worsened handling of COVID-19 pandemic during that time. So we are in the dilemma on how we prevent infection in the evacuation centers. And also at the same time, we want also to make sure that that people of a certain city where it has been affected by flood or typhoon will be secured from their houses from flood or landslide. So we need to balance that. Climate-related disaster during pandemic worsened the impact. So during that time, I also had an encounter on how to put policies and how to segregate the people in the evacuation center, which means that pandemics and climate disaster resulted in compound crisis. So during that time, COVID-19 pandemic, we're not only dealing with COVID-19. We had a lot of problems brought about by certain disasters, including typhoon and flood. So this is actually a photo, a reflection of how we managed during the pandemic. At the same time, when we had a flood, we need to secure our people, moving them from their houses to the evacuation center. So just imagine on how crowded and dense the area, which means it is an area of very high risk of transmission of different types of infection. So climate change causes sea level rise, agricultural collapse, and extreme heat zones. So this leads to displacement of the people, overcrowded settlements, and of course, even if we want to practice because of crowding, no, we have poor sanitation. Now, the condition that you can see, no, in this picture are ideal conditions for outbreaks, diarrheal diseases, and respiratory infection. There was actually an interview, no, before regarding what should we do. We have COVID-19, but we have to transfer the patient to evacuation center. So what we actually advise during that time is to make sure that people are wearing masks because this is a dense area. However, it is not really possible all the time, no? And then diarrheal diseases is also very common in the evacuation center. Now, the climate change, no, it was mentioned in the lecture of Prof. Soriano that it also compromises the food supply. No? So it affects the agriculture. No, drought reduces crop yield, flooding destroys the farm, heat stress affects the livestock, no, which all affect the supply of food. No, and then ocean warming reduces fisheries. The result is that it reduced food availability. It increases the food prices. So remember, if you can notice, if there is a typhoon, the prices of even the simple food, no, and even the vegetables, the fish, the meat, are all tumataas talaga. The food prices increases during the typhoon or any disasters, no, which now result into malnutrition. Now, malnutrition can be can actually make, no, the patient more immunocompromised. No, here is the slide, no, emphasizing that malnutrition and immune function are actually interconnected. So again, climate change causes or affects the food supply. The food, if it affected the food supply, it can result to malnutrition, and malnutrition causes it weakens the immune system. So food insecurity leads to protein energy malnutrition. It causes micronutrient deficiencies because what they usually eat during the disaster or in the evacuation center are yung instant food, no, usually noodles, no, and then some are not really that nutritious food, no. It impairs further the immune response and increases the susceptibility to different types of infection. Remember, the infection, no, the vulnerability of a patient to acquire infection highly depends on the immune function. Okay. So food outbreaks and climate. So warmer temperature, actually it increases the bacterial growth in the food. So mas madali siyang mapanis, no? For the crops or agriculture, there is an increase in mycotoxin production. This one is produced by the fungi, no, that affects some of the crops and plants that can harm the health, no. It also can cause harmful algal blooms, no, that affects the crops and agricultural products. This now leads to, especially the bacterial growth, to gastroenteritis outbreaks. So you can see here on the right, no, the photo of a community from Davao that resulted into diarrheal outbreak, no, secondary to a contaminated water. It can even also result to seafood-related intoxication and increases burden of diarrheal diseases. It has been proven by our data from DOH that during rainy season, there is an increase in number of diarrheal diseases, no, during that time. Now, not only will be the communicable diseases or infectious diseases can be affected by climate change. No, the climate change also increases the heat-related cardiovascular mortality like heat stroke. No, it can also worsen the asthma. So because of air pollution, wildfires, no, it can trigger asthma, no, exacerbation, and mental health disorders like, for example, climate anxiety or disaster trauma. So, meaning although it affects, no, greatly a lot of infectious diseases, we are not only concerned about it, we are also concerned on the non-communicable diseases, more of direct effect, no, to the health of the patients. Now, in assessing the risk, no, it's very important also to know who are the vulnerable population. So the vulnerable population, these are the ones that can easily suffer the mortality and morbidity brought about by a certain infection or disease. No, so the ones are the elderly patients. This is because they have immunosenescence. Their immune system is blunted because of the age. Also, because of the immature immune system, children are also considered a part of the vulnerable population. Pregnant women in general are considered immunocompromised patients. No, they have a blunt immune system during pregnancy, likely because to prevent rejection of the fetus. No, so medyo considered din sila as immunocompromised patients. Low-income community could be related to the malnutrition of the members of the community, coastal population, and we also have a healthcare fragile system. So the climate stress widens further the health inequity, which means the rich can still seek consult properly to the private hospitals, but because a lot of people will get sick in times of disruptions or disasters due to climate change, it now increases the number of people that public health that the government hospitals should accommodate. Therefore, sometimes they are not, our facilities are not enough. Now, what is very important is also to have a resilient healthcare system. So we need to have this one in the right. It shows the framework of risk management. So we need to have prevention and mitigation and preparedness. The action towards resilience should not only be done during the disaster. More importantly, we need to prepare even without yet the typhoon. We need to strengthen our system to be able to accommodate the patients. For example, increase in patients consultation during disaster. At the same time, any mitigation plans for flood, so that the hospital can still operate despite the disaster. So now we also have to manage the disaster impact, but important as well is to how to rehabilitate, recover, and respond with the disaster. So part of the rehabilitation and response in improving the resilience of the healthcare system is you have also to know what are the things that you have to improve after the disaster. So there should be an evaluation every after disaster on how we can improve on our healthcare system. So we also need to improve on our disease surveillance, climate-informed outbreak prediction model. We also have to keep on learning on how to control the vectors, food system resilience planning, early warning signs or systems should be implemented as well. We have improved a lot from before. If you can notice there, kapag yung cellphone, grabe yung alarm every time there is disaster or typhoon. But I think we still have to improve every time we encounter typhoon, earthquake, disaster. And health system climate proofing is also important. I think policy making implementation is also very important in making the healthcare system resilient. Okay. So One Health approach, not only we are going to address the human health, we also have to address the animal health and environmental health, because one can have an impact to another. But that happens during the pandemic. We have realized that already. So this time is to call to action. So this is to call the healthcare professionals, especially the doctors, to advocate climate mitigation policies, integrate climate risk into infection control. So you need to coordinate properly with the infection control, especially if there is a threat of outbreak. Strengthen antimicrobial stewardship, because unnecessary use of antibiotics will result to outbreak of multi-drug resistant organism. If there's an abuse of use of the antibiotic, it also can have an impact on the healthcare system. promote food security initiative, and support resilient healthcare system. So we need to have more sustainable policies, no, that we need to implement in our healthcare system. So for the last part, climate change is not only an environmental issue, it can have an impact on infectious diseases, pandemic preparedness, food security issue, and health system resilience issue. So we need to be prepared. We need to be more resilient, especially that we have concern on climate change. So definitely climate change is a threat multiplier. So we need to strengthen our resilience right now and implement mitigation strategies to minimize the effect of climate change. So thank you everyone, again PCP, for inviting me here to deliver the lecture.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tagarda, for that comprehensive discussion about the connection between climate change and human health, especially infectious diseases. And now we will move on to our question and answer part. So doctors, colleagues, and viewers, we now are open the floor for your questions. Please type your question in the chat box. Our speakers are very willing and happy to answer all your questions. So maybe look if there are questions. I think we have question here no, directed to to Professor Soriano. So Prof, sir, we have a question here. Among the 9 planetary boundaries that you mentioned earlier, which transgressions pose the most immediate threat to human health in the Philippines, or let's say Southeast Asia?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's a bit of a complicated answer because the planetary boundaries, although they're presented as separate, they're also very much interwoven with each other. So probably, the biggest threat for all of us will be the climate change issue because we know what to do and we're a bit slow in terms of implementing the actions that would be needed to solve them. And as Dr. Tagarda mentioned, climate change is a threat multiplier. So it's affecting very diverse sets of outcomes of, ranging from physical dangers of flooding, all the way to the health impacts of it as well. And of course, the Philippines is very vulnerable to extreme weather events. So, but I also want to highlight this boundary of the novel entities. This is a relatively newer one within the framework. So these are the substances that we as humans created, and we don't exactly know their environmental impacts yet. So, think of all of the different PFAS compounds, microplastics, and all of these things that we have been introducing to the environment. So those also have, I would say at this point, a little bit unclear dimension on their health impacts, but a lot of people are concerned that we are introducing by the rate at which we're introducing them to the environment.
Thank you, sir. Follow-up question about the transgressions. No? So, are all boundary transgressions equally reversible, or are some already approaching tipping points?
That's a great question. No? So there is a lot of discussion about the boundaries themselves presenting the threshold at which we cross over to the tipping points. So some of those indeed are going to be very difficult to recover from once we transgress the boundaries. So I think that's why we should try as much as possible to get a lot of the actions in place to reverse them. But in terms of whether all of them are equally kind of reversible or not, I think the Earth system scientists more or less identified them all as being kind of critical. So that should that probably gives them a bit more puts them more on an equal footing in terms of the severity of their potential outcomes.
Thank you, sir. We have a question here from Dr. Doidora. So, do you think climate change has been incorporated in the curriculum of DepEd? Because the younger we inculcate climate awareness, the better we are in training the new generation to be planet conscious.
Okay, can I take that answer?
Sure,
I take
ma'am.
that question, sorry. So actually I have a daughter, no, still elementary high school. So they are actually I saw when I visited their school, it was part already of their curriculum, no. The climate change, the frameworks, no. It's quite impressive that when we were young, I'm not sure if I'm younger than or older than Prof. Soriano, no. But when we were young, it's not yet part of our curriculum. But right now, they are proactively incorporating climate change, which is actually very good, so that they are the next generation, no, that will utilize the planet. So it's a good thing that they have incorporated it already.
Thank you, Doctora. So that's no, no, good to hear, no, that they're already incorporating climate change, no, in the curriculum, the let's say elementary, no, up to the college level. So another question here, I think again directed to Professor Soriano, no, are there success stories of countries reversing or stabilizing boundary transgressions?
Um, yeah. So I think more on the global level, no, our best kind of model so far on being able to reverse some of these kind of global threats is yung sa ozone depletion. No? So back in the 1990s, this was probably widely discussed, maybe, in going back to the education curriculum, right? Like this was one of the things that our science classes was always telling us. So we are creating a hole in the ozone layer, and it's posing a global danger to all of us, and to some extent that has been uh, replaced by climate change in the curriculum these days. No? Pero that's because we, as a society, have managed to come together and put in place the necessary frameworks in order to ban the substances that were causing those damages to our ozone layer. So I think that really serves as a good kind of example for all of us to look to as we try to address the current threat of climate change.
Thank you, sir. So, another question, I think this is for Dr. Tagarda, no? Your previous slide, the slide showed notes that climate change expand vector ranges. In our current region or here in the Philippines, no? Uh, which vector-borne disease are we most concerned about seeing in previous safe areas?
I think these are the mosquito-borne diseases usually affects the breathing season. No, if we have all year-round unpredictable rainfall, it means that we have expanded also the breeding season for our vectors, specifically for dengue, because dengue mosquito or the Aedes aegypti dwells in the city, which means a lot of people will get exposed. So the Aedes aegypti not only carries the dengue, it is also the vector for chikungunya and Zika. So it results to outbreak. Actually, in my practice, every week, no, I have a patient of dengue. No, hindi siya nawawala. Unlike before, that it's only during June, July, no, that we have a peak of dengue cases. Sobrang ramdam po namin yan na consistently we have dengue cases.
Thank you, ma'am. And another question, ma'am. No? So, one of your slides, no, you said that a major risk of the settlements are the respiratory infection. So, in the context of climate migration, so are we seeing a rise in traditional infections like maybe a pulmonary infection like tuberculosis?
Yes, of
In this
course.
out that can cause an outbreak by these settlements.
Yeah, I think this is one of the factors why it's very difficult to control respiratory illnesses like tuberculosis, because every time there's migration, no, yung malilipat na naman sa evacuation center, not only are we having outbreaks on the common acute respiratory illnesses like flu, no, or even bacterial respiratory infections, the TB, which the onset usually is delayed, no? Matagal yung detection niyan. That's why I think this is a factor why we have difficulty controlling more of the respiratory illnesses, particularly the tuberculosis in the Philippines. So taas talaga ng impact sa respiratory infection. Kapag nasa evacuation center, the first manifestation, usually the outbreak is respiratory, and after several days, there is now an outbreak naman of diarrheal diseases. So compounding talaga siya.
Thank you, Doc. We have maybe a last question, no? And I hope you can both answer. What role can healthcare professionals play in planetary health advocacy?
Yeah, I can take a first stab at it, no. So I think these types of endeavors, no, itong pag-organize sa mga ganitong klaseng event was is really emblematic of kind of good progress or things that we can do, no, is to really incorporate these awareness of planetary kind of interlinkages between environmental issues and health outcomes. So not just for healthcare professionals as well, but for the broader public, including by putting it into our educational curriculum and so forth. No, and then of course I think things that we can all do, from our personal capacities is to participate in kind of our community and governance kind of advocacy. So we need leaders that can also really help to direct efforts in order to maximize our efforts at mitigation and adaptation. So yun ang sasabi ko.
Okay, thank you, Prof. For me naman, so magkaiba kami ng field, which is actually very, feeling ko, nagko-complement siya on how we actually deal with the climate change. In my experience during pandemic, we need to have a more resilient healthcare system, no? Especially that we are experiencing the effects of climate change more often, no, than before. We need to have policies to strengthen as well, no, to have a sustainable healthcare system. So yun, we need to cooperate with our government. Mahirap kasing gawin yan ng private sector lang. We need to have a collaboration with experts, with government people, and at the same time with the leaders of the private sector. So it's a collaborative parang movement, no? And definitely increasing awareness and implementing mitigation strategies to address the problems on climate change. So yun lang yung masasabi ko. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. So I really agree, no, kay Dr. Tagarda din, no? So here in the Philippines talaga, sir, no, we need the collaboration of the government, from national to LGU, NGOs, private sectors, no, para masustain yung mga current programs that is directed to the climate change control, no. And sir, Professor Soriano, no, we have a last question, no, pahabol lang ni Dr. Abalo. So on our setting, what is the plan concerning increased water level? Do we need flood control projects or resettlement to higher grounds?
Yeah, great question. I think we probably need a portfolio of options that we can implement. No, so there's actually consensus among the hydrology community that building these flood control types of infrastructure may actually kind of counterintuitively increase flood risk. So this is what we call the levee effect in my field, no? So this is because once you have those kind of large structures in place, there is the human tendency to be kind of overconfident a little bit in terms of building, extra development in these naturally hazard-prone areas, no? So that's something that we probably have seen in some communities in the Philippines as well, no, yung mga we build this flood control and suddenly there's a new community that is developing all around, even though that the flood control structure does not change the fact that that area is a floodplain. No? So it's still kind of the same region where the river naturally wants to go. No? So how do we navigate those tensions between we need to provide places where we can, of course, settle as communities, but also recognizing which areas are hazardous as well. No? And then, of course, the other side of that is yung public acceptance. So we cannot discount people's connections to their homes and where they consider to be a part of their identity. No? So in those scenarios, what it would be the best approaches, maybe then, we would really need some combination of these gray and green types of infrastructure as well.
Thank you, sir. So, it's not a question but a comment from Dr. Dordora. So, I think the punishment for violators of environmental laws isn't that emphasized. People get away with many crimes, so it isn't about policies, but implementation and penalizing violators could be a vital element. In addition, many of our fellow Filipinos just dump garbage anywhere. Children may receive information about climate change in school, but their parents at home aren't practicing proper waste disposal. So indeed, to have an effective implementation of climate change policies, it is both a governmental and personal level of commitment to carry out all these environmental laws. So, thank you, Doctor, for that comment. No? So, okay, so I think that's it. No, so again, thank you, Dr. Tagarda, and time. And before we end, no, on behalf of the Committee on Climate Change and Environment Health, I would like to extend again our heartfelt gratitude to both of you, Professor Soriano, Dr. Tagarda, and to all our participants who joined us today. Thank you for your time, engagement, and commitment to advancing planetary health. We hope this webinar inspires action not only in our institutions, no, but also in our daily practice. We will now proceed with the awarding of e-certificates to our speakers as a token of appreciation for the Philippine College of Physicians and the Committee on Climate Change and Environment Health. So, to Professor Mario Soriano Jr. for sharing his valuable knowledge as speaker of the climate change webinar titled Water Security and Planetary Health in a Warming World, held via Zoom on this day, 25th day of February 2026, signed by Dr. Demencio Nicodemus, our president of the PCP, Ian Homer Kua, Regent Champion of Climate Change, Committee on Climate Change Environment Health, Dr. Regina Berba, the head on Cluster of Public Health and Social Responsibility, and Dr. Sheila May Sonza, the chair of Committee on Climate Change, Environment and Health. And another certificate of appreciation to Dr. Tagarda for sharing her valuable knowledge as a speaker of the climate change webinar titled Water Security and Planetary Health in a Warming World, held via Zoom on 25th day of February 2026, signed by Dr. Nemencio Nicodemus, President of PCP, Dr. Ian Homer Kua, Regent Champion of the Committee on Climate Change, Environment and Health, Dr. Regina Berba, Head of the Cluster on Public Health and Social Responsibility, and Dr. Sheila May Sonza, Chair of the Committee on Climate Change, Environment and Health. Thank you, doctors. And to formally close our webinar, may we call on the Chair of the Committee on Climate Change, Environment and Health, Dr. Sheila May Sonza, for her closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chu. Good morning, colleagues, friends, viewers, and participants in Facebook and in the Zoom, and of course, our fellow protectors of Mother Earth. We are so blessed to have proficient and distinguished speakers this morning in the person of Professor Mario Soriano Jr. and Dr. Daisy Ilagan Tagarda, who are both experts in their fields. On behalf of the Committee of Climate Change, Environment and Health, I would like to express my gratitude to both of our excellent speakers for giving us this opportunity, for your excellent talk about water security. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to us, not only our doctors, but also our non-medical participants. So thank you so much. As well as to our moderator, Dr. Mark Chu, who is also a member of our committee. Thank you, Mark, for navigating our webinar today. So we have learned a lot, the importance of a clean water. And what I realized personally is that what we do to our environment has an impact. No, what when we damage our environment, we have impacts on our health as well. So we are all interrelated, but there is hope at the end of the tunnel. We are the ones who are gonna solve the problem. So both our speakers have talked about call to action or solutions, suggested solutions, so that we can lessen our impact to harm our environment. Actually, our committee has already started on our advocacies on collaborating with other organizations to somehow help the medical field. Now, we have collaborated with Healthcare Without Harm and started on our advocacy on global green and healthy hospitals. To promote this advocacy, we have started our a webinar as well as December, and hopefully we'll be continuing on this advocacy so that we can further mitigate the effects of climate change, because we all know the medical field has a great contribution in the pollution. So through greening our hospitals, we can lessen our contribution to the climate change as well. On behalf, again, of our committee, we would like to express our gratitude also to our participants. Hopefully, this impactful webinar will help us in reducing the what we call the impacts in our environment. So please continue on listening to our webinars. We will have more in the subsequent months. Rest assured that our committee will continue on our advocacies and impactful information dissemination drive through webinars such as this that would be of benefit to our health, our environment, and Mother Earth. We will continue to live on our mantra to teach, to plan, to protect. Please watch out for our next webinars in the coming months. And of course, I would like to give this information that all our webinars can be accessed in the I Am Doctor of Earth wall of the PCP website, and also at YouTube. You can rewatch this webinar so that you can learn again what Dr. Tagarda and Professor Mario Soriano has discussed earlier. Such amazing talk. So thank you once again. So without further ado, again, thank you so much to our excellent speakers and to all our participants. Hopefully, we'll see each other again in the next coming months. Keep safe, and thank you so much. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Dr. Sonsa, for that inspiring message. Truly, the role of physicians in climate and environmental health has never been more important. So again, on behalf of the Committee on Climate Change and Environmental Health, we would like to thank Philippine College of Physicians, the tech, the secretariat, our speakers for today, Professor Soriano, Dr. Tagarda, and of course, all of our attendees for making this webinar possible. And we will have more webinars in the future. So please join us in the future webinars. And before we end, we would like to invite everyone to the upcoming 56th Annual Congress of the Philippine College of Physicians, co-hosted by the PCP Marikina chapter, which titled Evolves from Conventional to Transformational, on May 3 to 6, 2026 at the SMX Convention Center, Pasay City. Also, there will be a pre-congress on May 3, 2026. Register now as slots are limited. And we also encourage you to stay connected with us as we continue to conduct more climate-related webinars and initiatives. On behalf of the PCP Committee on Climate Change and Environmental Health, thank you for joining us today. This concludes our session. Have a meaningful day ahead and stay safe, everyone.